Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? So if you watch my Mama tried. So if you watch my vlog regularly, I sometimes vlog from my bedroom when it's very loud outside. And today we are having the tree pruners. I actually just got done with my I'm so full of ums. I think I'm kind of nervous to make this video, in all honesty. Oh, I keep on saying if I'm not saying I'm saying like, or you know, or interested. Those are my catchphrase words. But anyway, or anyway, I say that a lot too. Yeah, I'm nervous to make this video. I don't know why. Now everybody's gonna be counting my ums and not listening to what I'm saying in this video. Okay, let's just get to this video. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video. So, I just got done with my therapy session with my therapist on Zoom. I'm just gonna have to ignore the ums because I don't know why I'm nervous about talking about this. I think because in each video that I talk about my OCD or serious situations that I'm working on with my therapist, I try to be more and more vulnerable in making those videos. And the reason why I try to do that is because if something comes out of my therapy session that I think to myself, I've never heard that before, right? Or I think this is an important topic, or wow, this like impacted me profoundly in a way that has never happened before. I want to share it with you guys in the hopes that maybe one person out there will hear it and it will help them too. In the same way that me having just listened to it a half an hour ago helped me, if that makes sense. That's why I try to get on video and be vulnerable and just share exactly what's going on with me. Just to make that completely clear, because I'm sure that there are some people out there that are like, why are you sharing all this? Why are you talking about your therapy sessions and whatever? You know, when I started going to therapy regularly, my husband and I, we see the same therapist and we also see him for marriage counseling. So we go to marriage counseling every other week, and then I'm in therapy every week, every other week, just depending on kind of the severity of what's going on at the time. So and we had seen a therapist previous to who we're seeing right now, years ago. When we started going to marriage counseling was at a time when, and I've been somebody that's, you know, believed in therapy for years and years and years, and through my life have seen many different people. But our marriage was in such a crappy place at that time, and in all reality, I can remember laying in this very bed thinking to myself, we're just going to get divorced. Like, I don't really see any other way out of this. And it was all the way from small things to bigger things. You know, people ask me all the time, they're like, what was the driving thing that drove you to therapy, you know? Out of protection of my husband and myself and our marriage, there are things that I want to obviously keep private. And some of them, I think, if I told you, you'd just be like, those are so insignificant, right? Like, why would that be something that would lead to divorce? I think one of the things I found at that time was that even the smallest things that cause cracks and wedges in relationships can lead to splintering a relationship or a marriage completely in half. Even the smallest things, you know? And I know this is going to sound silly, but I was watching The Real Housewives of Orange County with my husband like a week or two ago, and there was a scene in it where Emily and her husband take the kids to go to like this pumpkin patch or something like that. And while they're there, she says something to one of their kids, and he corrects her and says, no, what you're going to do is this. And she gets very upset about it. And later, you know, she said, you basically took my power away as a parent. And she said, I felt very diminished in that moment. I think there's many points in relationships, whether you're married or whether you're just in a long-term relationship or even short-term relationships, where we can feel like our power or our voice is diminished and we don't feel like we have a voice. What really drove both of us to marriage counseling was number one, that we were going to get divorced. And I'll never forget, and I'm the believer in counseling, I'm the believer in therapy and self-help and all this kind of stuff and motivation. And it was my husband that came to me and he said, we need to go to therapy, because if we don't go to therapy, we're not going to make it. And he said, what I'm asking you to do is go to therapy with me, give it everything that we have for a year, and then if at the end of the year we decide that we don't want to be together anymore, then we won't be together anymore. But we should give it everything that we have for a year. That year saved our marriage, made our marriage 150% better than it ever would have been before. Before anything even got bad, it made it so much better than it ever was before, because we understood each other on a different level, right? But it also, I think, individually saved each of our lives by entering intensive individual therapy at that point and really working on ourselves. And ultimately, we had to work on ourselves to better each other in a marriage and realize how we could, co-partner each other and help each other and things like that. But I think the number one thing that really led us to that point was both of us feeling that the other person had diminished our voice or diminished our emotions or our feelings throughout the marriage. It could just be like some offhand comment. I know that people think that something huge has to happen for couples to break up or for couples to lead to divorce, but that's not necessarily the case. Couples can't get to that point because, I used to use this example all the time that, I would say to Alex, like, where do you want to go to dinner tonight? And he would say, oh, let's go have Mexican. And I'd say, oh, I don't really feel like Mexican. Let's have pizza. And he'd say, oh, I don't really feel like having pizza. And then I'd say, well, you pick. No, you pick. No, you pick. And then all of a sudden, we're sitting at dinner. Neither one of us wants to really be there because we're so bitter with the other person because we fought. And then we don't really speak. And we get home and then we're not speaking. And then it's trash day, and he forgets to take out the trash. I'm like, gosh, you don't even care about the house. You forgot to take out the trash. What do you mean I don't care about the house? You don't care about me because you forgot about this. And then all of a sudden what happens is days have gone on with this fight, and you no longer are fighting with each other. The fight is having you. And that was something I was told years ago by somebody, that it's at the point where you stop having the fight, and the fight is having you, that relationships disintegrate. And where you don't feel like you have a voice anymore, and you don't feel like you're heard. And I think that is a really important point to get your ass into some marriage counseling or couples counseling. To sit there and say, I don't feel like I'm heard, I don't feel like I'm validated. And I didn't feel like I was heard or validated from my husband, and he didn't feel like he was either from me. And so it doesn't take huge things to get to the point where you are slowly pulled away from each other. It just kind of happens. Well, when we got into marriage counseling, I decided that I was going to start sharing about it on video because I wanted to normalize that process for people. And the reason why was because I wasn't the person that had the history of working in the field, the person that believed in therapy, the sober person in the relationship. I was the resistant person to going to therapy. I did not want to sit in a marriage counseling session. I would rather have given up on the marriage than ever work on the marriage. It was my husband begging me to save the marriage. My husband that had no history of going to therapy, that had no history in recovery, that had no history in self-work or self-motivation or, none of that. He was the one that was pushing me to save the marriage. I was the one like, it's over, there's no point, let's not go. When we got into the therapy session, the very first therapy session, and the therapist said, are you both committed to, or something to this effect, are you both committed to working on this relationship? And we both said yes. And I kind of surprised myself saying that. And Alex explained to him that we were agreeing to give a year to this relationship. And I was kind of like sitting there like, I'm not really sure I do agree on that. But leaving that session, I was under full agreement that we were going to give it a year. And I was terrified. Like, I was as ready to book out that door as I was to bawl my eyes out and feel like we were over. Like, I was ready to leave and I was ready to stay and play victim, I don't really, that was such a confusing time for me. But what I wanted to normalize was that anybody can get help by going to therapy. And you don't have to, it doesn't, for years, my friend, Tanya would always say to me, therapy is just really like a sounding board where you go in and you share things with people, And I've worked on so many things in therapy, things that like I never thought would come up. With my first therapist that we were working, well, the first therapist, not mine, but the first therapist that we were working on in marriage counseling, when I was seeing him individually, somehow randomly it just came up about my bullying from growing up and how I was horrifically bullied, you know, from kindergarten or first grade all the way through high school. And even after that, I was horrifically bullied, you know. And he looked at me and he said, and like I've shared this in other videos, that like I'm not huge on like diagnosing somebody with 15 things unless they need to be and things like that. So I'm not trying to pick up diagnoses. But he said, do you think there's any chance that you suffer PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of having been bullied for so many years? Because I constantly would be like, if something happened that I didn't know where it was coming from, I was like flinching, like what is going on, like whatever. And he said that reaction is how people with PTSD, whether they're, you know, people that have been in the military or whether they've been in traumatic events, whatever, that they constantly are kind of like, you know, cats on a hot tin roof. Like they're kind of like nervous all the time about like what's going to happen next, you know? And he said, I noticed that about you at times, that you kind of respond that way. And I think it also had a lot to do with why I you know, haven't defended myself for a very long time, because I was afraid of the repercussions, which is why this whole idea of this is my standing up for myself era is really important to me, you know? So, and that kind of goes into what we're talking about today. And so when he said that, it was like, in this just off-the-cuff conversation that I didn't even know that we were going to have that day about me being bullied, he was the first person in what, 45 years, 47 years or something like that? He was the first person that had ever made me feel seen, who had ever validated what I went through to the extent that I went through it. Because I hid it from a lot of people. I hid it from my mom. I hid it from my dad. I didn't want them to know how bad it was for me. I think my friends in school kind of knew, but they didn't even know the extent that it went to. I think, you know, a few teachers knew, kind of had an idea that I was being bullied, but didn't really ever know the lengths that it went to. I never had really talked to any boyfriends about it other than I was bullied, but it never really went past that. Alex was really the first person I ever trusted with that story of telling him about it, and my sponsors in recovery. I have talked to my sponsors in recovery about it. But that all came out in the form of inventory, talking about resentments and anger and fear and things like that. It was never really about being seen that what I went through was a traumatic experience. Which I had gotten comments from people for so many years that like, you're almost 50 years old. Like, you need to let this go. You need to move through it. Well, nobody had ever given me a roadmap of how to move through the pain that I had experienced from bullying. So how was I supposed to move through something that I didn't even know how to move through? I had no idea how to do that, right? I had no idea whatsoever, and nobody was showing me the way until I met him. And that therapist really, to some degree, saved my life and allowed me to kind of move through that pain. That's why I wanted to normalize people going to therapy, people going to counseling, people going to life coaching, people, you know, seeking out professional help, because I think there's such a huge stigma around it. Which kind of brings me to my conversation today. So I'm talking to my therapist right now about having obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, and we've been working really hard on it. I've been working really hard on it, and he's been assisting me. And so my assignment from 2 weeks ago, and I just asked him right now, I said, do you think I need to come see you, or come see you on Zoom? Do you think I need to see you next week or in 2 weeks? And he said, no, I think that we can go 2 weeks. He said, let's try 2 weeks. And then if you need to see me in between, he goes, call me. He goes, you don't even have to set up a session. We can just check in or whatever if something comes up. And I said, okay. He goes, but if we need to set up a session, we can. So I have really been working hard on this. When I tell you that I didn't even realize how many rituals I have, and this is the part that's embarrassing and kind of shameful to talk about, even though I don't think that there should be any shame associated with mental health issues. But that's how we got into the conversation that we had. When I tell you that I have to tap on things in 4, 8s, 12s, and 16 numbers, everything from alarm clocks to door handles to light switches to washing machines to coffee makers to my phone to the bed to folding clothes and doing that. I mean, it is non-stop tapping, okay? That there are certain places that I have to step on the floor. There are ways that I have to put things down. Handles on coffee cups have to sit a certain way. I have to step on certain cracks in the driveway or in the street. If there are loose leaves in the street, which is coming up on fall, I have to pick up the leaves. I have to put them in a certain place in the yard. There's a specific place in the yard that leaves go. Sticks go in a different place. I mean, it's constant, you guys. And it makes me sound like a crazy person to talk about it. And it's shameful. So I was telling him that I have worked really, really hard in the last 2 weeks. And one of the things that's happened is he gave me the assignment to not create any new rituals. That as they're going through my head, to not engage in them. And I was explaining to him that one of the things that I have been able to do that, but one of the things that's hard about that is that many times I'm almost kind of like for example, if in my head, all of a sudden it said to me, like I have a tripod. You guys are on a tripod right now, okay? And you're on this like stand, and I have you on top of it. Let me just show you this so this will make sense. I know this is completely stupid, but I don't know if you guys can see, but there's like those holes on there, right? On this bench. So right now, I don't have you in the holes. I have you on top of the cushions. If I was looking at that, my mind might tell me they need to be in holes instead of, and that would be a new ritual, and I have to work through that. I don't even know where that would come up with, but that's something that would happen, okay? And it would have to, and there would be some numerical situation to it. It would have to be like, they have to be in a triangle, or there would be some other rule to that, right? The ritual would happen when it happens more than once. That then every time that I put the tripod on there, they would have to be in the exact same place, okay? So I've done pretty good on that. But the thing is that one of the things I found, and I don't know if anybody else out there that's tried to stop forming new rituals this has happened to, but one of the things I have found is that sometimes the new thought or ritual comes into my head and I'm engaging in it. It's like having to put something in the trash a certain way. That's another one. I have to put things in the trash a certain way. I have to have certain cups out on the counter a certain way. I have to have cups in the cabinet a certain way. The dishwasher has to be loaded a certain way. I mean, you guys, it's constant. I mean, when I talked to him the first time about it, he said, Peter, I want you to know this is really severe. He goes, I don't even know how you've kept it hidden so long from people. I don't either, except for that I was embarrassed and ashamed of it. Which is why I want to talk about it publicly, because I want, number one, I have to bring attention to it. And he gave me a really good example. But number two, I want to destigmatize the embarrassment around OCD and other mental health issues, because that's what we were talking about today in my video. That's what I was talking about today in my session with him at the end of the session. So I'm doing pretty good on not creating new rituals. As far as pushing through the older rituals that I've had, I was telling him, I said, okay, now I can over-exaggerate when it comes to percentages. Let me give an accurate percentage. And I said, I think I'm probably at about a 70% success rate on being able to push through my rituals. He goes, wow, that's impressive. I go, I've worked very hard. The problem is, I'm conscious of it all the time, that I'm pushing through it. It's not like I'm just flying up the stairs and I'm not thinking about what steps because there's a certain way I have to walk up the steps. When I'm walking up the steps, I'm thinking to myself, don't walk this, you have to push against the thinking in your head, right? The compulsion. You have to, because that's what it's about, is compulsions. You have to push against it. When I'm walking, out in the street, I think to myself, don't step on these certain cracks. Don't pick up these leaves. Like, I have to push through it, right? Which 70% of the time, I'm pretty successful at. There are a few things that still exist that I'm really struggling with. And I was telling him that it's not like really when stuff happens or comes up. It's almost like when my mind is kind of shut off and I'm listening to an audiobook, or I'm watching like Fear the Walking Dead late at night, or last night I was watching Only Murders in the Building. It's like when my mind is kind of like at the most peace and serenity. It's almost kind of like, in a crazy way, I live better in chaos. And I've known this for a while because I grew up in chaos, so I live really well in chaos. But it's almost like I live better in chaos, And so when I'm the most peaceful, I almost don't know what to do with it. Like, I do really well for about 20 minutes, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so peaceful, I'm so calm. And then it's like out of nowhere, it just like hits me and I don't know what to do with it, right? So he was like, well, what rituals, you know, have you been unable to give up and things like that? And so I was going through some of them because he knows most of my rituals. And I said, you know, there's one that comes up every once in a while. I said, it's not a ritual I always do because it's too involved. And I said, but I noticed the other day that I was doing it and I wasn't even thinking about it. And he goes, well, what is it? And I started laughing. I said, it's really embarrassing to talk about. I said, it's stupid. It's a crazy ritual. And he said, well, what is it? And I go, well, I'm really embarrassed to even talk about it. So what it is, I know y'all are like, well, what is it? I mean, it's silly. A lot of these rituals, I mean, they're all silly, right? Which is why it's embarrassing to talk about. Because when you're talking about it to anybody out there on the street that doesn't live this way, it's like, well, what? So you're doing these compulsions because you think that you have some overriding fear that something bad is going to happen, but you tapping on a phone 4 times is going to stop a meteor hitting the earth. Yeah, that's kind of what your mind thinks. I know it's crazy, right? Like, and I think that's part of it. And I was talking to him about that today. I was like, part of what makes me feel like I'm going crazy is knowing that these things are, and he looked at me and he goes, not logical. And I said, yeah. And he goes, do you realize that most people that have mental health issues, their thinking is based in not being logical, which is why other people have a really hard time understanding what they're going through, right? And I said, oh, I didn't think about it that way. He goes, that's why we have so much shame of mental health issues in our country, is because people don't understand it, and what they do is they make fun of it, right? So I went in. That's important. That's what people do, is they make fun of things they don't understand, right? So I went in and I explained to him what this ritual was. And what the ritual is that as I'm leaving the kitchen, I don't always do this, but sometimes I do. And sometimes I find myself just doing it and I don't even know why. We have these 3 tiles. Our kitchen floor is tiles, right? And like these slate tiles. And there's these 3 tiles as you walk out of the kitchen. I have to put my foot down, left, then right, on the far tiles. And the ones in the middle, I have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 with my feet. How does your mind think up something like that? Can somebody explain that to me, please? That my mind thinks up this game that I have to do, but it doesn't feel like a game. It feels like I have to do this because if I don't do this, the world is going to come to an end. Explain to me how you could do this and not think that you're losing it, okay? That I literally, somewhere in my, up there, if there is a God, some God is forcing me to put 2 feet down and go like this, okay, like duck feet 4 times, or the world's going to come to an end. But that's how I feel, right? So I'm explaining it to him about how embarrassed I am, and he goes, well, part of the problem is that in our society, that we laugh at things that we don't understand. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is interesting because for years, people that didn't understand gay people make fun of them. This is why I take such issue with people that are like, oh, that, blah, 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 whatever, right? They stereotype all of us. And yes, I have a lot of those stereotypes, but they make fun of things they don't understand. They make fun of the, effeminate behavior of many gay men. Because to make fun of it, they can understand humor, but they can't understand somebody actually living their life like that, right? So that was something I experienced for much of my life, was people making fun of my mannerisms. It's cruel. I don't know why we think that's funny. I don't think there's anything funny about that. I don't think it's funny to pick something out about somebody, you know, and whatever. Something they can't help, you know? It's not like growing up, if I could have changed how I sounded or how I walked, guarantee I could care less today because I've gone through it to the other side. But guarantee, if I could have changed in 6th grade that my walk was more effeminate or that my talk was more effeminate than the other guys that I went to school with, trust me, I would have changed that because it brought me too much unwanted attention and too much pain, you know? And so I was saying to him something about this, and he said, have there been people out there that have made fun of you or made jokes about it? And I said, Well, only a few online, which kind of surprises me. I've only had a few people online. I got a comment on one of my videos on my drama channel, and somebody said something about your OCD must not be happening today because you only flipped your fan so many times or whatever. I blocked them quickly. I thought, you know what? You don't need to be ignorant over here, okay? So you're just going to not watch my videos anymore. And I don't know if they thought that that was cute or that was funny. There was a couple other comments, but there weren't a lot, honestly. There were a couple other comments that people made some ignorant statements, but there weren't a lot. And in all honesty, I just blocked those people, you know, because I was like, I'm not going to deal with cruelty when I'm trying to be vulnerable and share about my life to help somebody else out there and to help myself as well, right? And so we were talking about it, and he said, you know, this is why TV shows like Monk and other things like that they have had characters that have OCD, and they make fun of that because it's funny. And he goes, the reality is, whether we want to admit this or not, that there are certain mental health issues that are deemed appropriate to laugh at, and there are those mental health issues that are not funny to laugh at. He said, unfortunately, OCD is one of those that people think it's okay to laugh at. And he goes, which really stigmatizes it further. And he goes, you see it in TV shows. A lot of TV shows, a lot of movies have characters that have funny OCD traits. I'm like, oh my God, this is so true. Like, I had never really thought about that before, right? And who is knocking on my door? I will be right back. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. It was a package at the front door for me. Something that I might review in my review channel, but I don't know. But anyway, so we were talking about it, and he was talking about, I can't remember where I left off, but he was saying that, you know, there are certain mental health issues that are deemed inappropriate to laugh at. And there are certain mental health issues that people have kind of said over time that it's okay to laugh at. And he said, I don't think anything is okay to laugh at mental health wise. He said, but Hollywood adds to the stigma when we have characters in movies and TV shows that have these funny ha-ha OCD traits. And because I had said to him earlier, I said, when I was trying to explain like how a ritual begins, did you hear that? I just ran up and down the stairs. Whew. I was trying to explain to him like when a ritual begins. And I say it's kind of hard to explain to somebody that doesn't have it. Like you can't even really explain it. And so he brought that up again, and he said, you know, this is what happens when people don't understand OCD. They make fun of it. And I said, okay, so are you saying that it's like not considered a serious mental health issue compared to other things? He goes, actually, OCD, because we were talking about the difference between OCD as a mood disorder and OCPD as a personality disorder. And he goes, actually, OCD is considered a very serious mental health issue. And he goes, nobody should be laughing at it at all. And I said, okay, well, what should I do when people, you know, laugh at it? And he said, do you have people? And I said, he goes, are there people online that are making fun of it? And I go, no, not really, but that like wouldn't bother me as much as people like in my personal life. And there's been a lot of people like, you know, Alex has been very supportive of it when I've told him. Caroline, Tanya, things like that. They've been very supportive. I've had a few people in my life, and they tend to be older, not younger. You would think it would be like younger people, right? But they tend to be older people that kind of poke jokes every once in a while. And I think it's kind of like, if I had to try to understand it, it's that they want to let me know that they're supportive, but instead of asking questions, like they'll make jokes about stuff. Like they'll look at like if I say like, oh, I used to pick up trash on the floor with Tanya and whatever, right? They'll like see a piece of trash and they'll be like, do you need to pick that up? And I'm like, that's not funny. Like, why would you say that to me? Like, that's not funny, you know? Like, I've noticed that I've had that happen just a few times, right? And I said that to my therapist, and he kind of like, just kind of like cringed a little bit. Like, who seriously says that to anybody? And I said, so do you think I shouldn't talk about this on videos? Do you think I should keep it to myself? You know, what should I do with this? And he goes, no, you need to talk about it. You need to continue to share it. You need to, he goes, number one, to help yourself. The shirt keeps on munching up on me. He said, number one, to help yourself. He said, but number two, to help the disease. But he said, number two, to bring awareness to it and help other people. He said, you know, silence helps the predator, because the predator wants to keep things silent. He said, with a disease like with a mental health issue like OCD, he said, you not talking about it, you not bringing awareness to it, keeps it a secret. And he said, silence and secrets further these kind of situations from happening. He goes, so that needs to happen, you know, like you need to come out and you need to continue talking about this, because you're just going to minimize the OCD from coming out more. The more you talk about it, the more you draw attention to it, which is scary to me, right? Like the more I talk about it to people, the more I get on video and I share about it, the more I'm open about it with people in my life. I mean, I can just, like, this is gonna sound crazy, but my neighbor a couple years ago, well, not a couple years ago, probably last fall, she noticed I was walking in on the driveway. I mean, it's very obvious. We have cracks like on this side and then cracks on this side. And I had to hit these cracks and then go over and hit these cracks. So it's like I'm doing like a diagonal on my driveway. Well, she noticed it. And she said something to me because she used to be a school administrator and she used to work with, you know, she used to work within school systems with behavioral issues and things like that. And all kinds of stuff. And she said to me, she said something to me about, she didn't come right out and say OCD. I can't remember how she said it, but she said something to me about how I was walking the driveway. Not in a critical way at all. Just like asking a question about it. And I was like, oh no, not at all. I don't know why I do that, right? And she was like, oh, okay. She was like, well, you know, I have like a lot of experience if you want to talk about that. And I was like, no, I don't know why I do that. It was just something I started doing. And I mean, I was so embarrassed. And she approached me in such a nice way about it, you know? And I've since told her, I used that example with her. I said, she didn't remember it at all. But she used to work with a lot of students that had OCD and even OCPD and things like that. And so now she knows. And, you know, she never shames me. She always just asks me things like, how's your therapy going? Like, are you working on things? Oh, I have a book that maybe you would want to read that I think would help you understand it a little bit more if you want to. And I'm like, okay, thanks, blah, 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 whatever. Very supportive. But there's been, you know, just a few people that have kind of made some statements to me that I'm kind of like, why would you say that? I don't understand it, right? But like my therapist says, it's important for me and for my overall well-being to bring awareness to it, and even at the expense of being laughed at. But it doesn't feel good to be laughed at, you know, about something that you can't control. So please don't laugh at me. You know, or I guess if you need to, not to my face. It doesn't feel nice, you know. Much of my life I was laughed at to my face about things I couldn't control. You know. Laugh at my beard. I can trim my beard, you know. Laugh at my clothes. I can change my clothes, you know. Laugh at my hair color, I can change my hair color. Laugh at my hair, I can change my hair, you know, things like that. Laugh at my hat or whatever. But don't laugh at things that people can't change about themselves, that they're working on, trying to grow and become better people, or not even better people. Because I was telling him, I said, you know, so much of this work feels very similar to me of when I first got sober. And, you know, there's this saying in recovery that we're not bad people trying to get good, we're sick people trying to get well. And I believe that about this same situation, you know, that I'm not a crazy person trying to become sane. I'm a sick person trying to get well. But I will tell you one thing that I really realized through all of this, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day whose daughter has had Asperger's for a very, very long time and has really affected her life and things like that. And we were talking and she said, you know, since she started seeing this new therapist and like everything's changed for her and she sees things in a completely different world and she's found all these books. And I said, you know, one of the things that's interesting to me is I'm kind of like afraid to share this because this is just my observation, okay? Other people could see things completely different and maybe not agree with me. So, but this is just how I make sense of it. For a very long time, I didn't understand why, because I even said to my therapist, I said something to him about, like, in our marriage counseling session about, like, wondering if maybe, like, you know, that people always say on the spectrum, like, you know, like, am I on the spectrum somewhere or whatever? And he said, well, in all honesty, Peter, he said, a lot of these other diagnoses walk a fine line with OCD and look very similar to that. He said, so no, you definitely have OCD. And he goes, what you're seeing is you're seeing other effects of the OCD coming out. I was like, okay, that makes sense. But one of the things that I realized was that I kept it a secret for so long from so many people. Like, one of the things my therapist says is, he's like, I don't even know how you kept it a secret for so long. And I would literally wait. Like, I would stand in the kitchen to walk out of the kitchen until Alex was in the other room sitting down so he couldn't see me, to come out of the kitchen and go out of the kitchen a certain way. I would wait. Like, I would have things to do in the kitchen. I mean, and he'd be like, are you coming here to watch this show? And I'd be like, yeah, hold on a second. And then I would finally come out, you know? I did things to protect it from keeping a secret, which is why he said I need to bring awareness to it, even at the expense of being laughed at. And, which I think is true, you know? He was like, don't be, you know, your OCD secret keeper. Don't do that, because it'll just get worse. I think, like, one of the biggest things I realized through this is that for a long time, and this isn't just related to the OCD, this is also related to being gay, this is also related to being bullied, this is also related to being in recovery. But I think that the way that I looked at the world was different than how everybody else looked at the world. And I was saying this to my friend who was talking about her daughter. And I said, you know, one of the things I've realized is I'm not bad or good or whatever for having OCD. It's just that I look at the world in a completely different way than everybody else looks at the world. You know, your daughter looks at the world in a different way because she has Asperger's, and so she makes sense of the world in a different way. Not everybody that has OCD is going to look at the world in the exact same way. They're all going to look through it through their own eyes. They're all different languages that we're speaking with what we're given, you know? So I look through several different lenses at the world. I look at the world through the point of view of being a gay man that came out when he was 18, that's married. You know, I look through the lens of being somebody in a biracial relationship. I look at through the world as a lens of being in an age gap relationship. I look at the world through being an only child. I look at the world from being a privileged white man, which I think is a huge importance to talk about, that people in the world look at it in a completely different way. I look at the world from the point of view of, being an addict and alcoholic in recovery and having even lived that life. I look at the world from the point of view of having OCD. That's just one of those things, but it is an important factor in how I look at the world, you know, that I view the world differently because of all of those things, but OCD is a part of it. It doesn't make me bad. That doesn't make me a freak. That doesn't mean that I'm less than anybody else. That just means I look at the world a little bit differently than everybody else. And I probably always will. But I also don't want to continue to keep living the same way that I was living, with these obstacles in the way that make me feel like, and I know this is not a popular word, but I'm just using my own language, that makes me feel like I'm going nuts on a daily basis, because it does at times. As I'm doing it, I'm questioning it and saying, God, what is wrong with you? When I know what is wrong with me, you know? But it doesn't make it feel any less crazy or out of control. And so I'm working slowly to be able to manage it. And I'll probably always continue to see the world through that point of view. And that's okay. I think, if anything, one thing that it's really helped me to do is, I've always been an advocate for affordable, good mental health treatment in our country. I've talked about it for years on my channels, even long before I was working on this diagnosis, which you guys can fact check on my other videos if you want. I think it's made me even want to understand and educate myself even further on other mental health issues that I don't even have myself, to understand them greater. And so many people reach out to me and they'll say, Peter, I don't have OCD, but I have this and I have that, and my therapist is this, and I just wanted to educate you on that because, you know, maybe you don't know about this. And it's been so enlightening, and so many people have shared their stories with me, and I'm so grateful for that. What an honor, you know? What a cool thing. So I just wanted to kind of share with you guys today where I'm at, you know? And maybe if we can destigmatize people getting help, and we can destigmatize there being something wrong with people that have mental health issues or addiction issues, and we can stop laughing at them or making fun of them. I hate the TikToks of people that are filming addicts, you know, that are out of control, and they think that that's funny or that's going to get somebody sober, which shame has never gotten anybody sober. I'm sorry, it just hasn't. And I know that. Shame has never gotten anybody sober and kept them sober. And I don't believe that shame really helps anybody understand their mental health issues or help them get better in any kind of way. But if we can destigmatize it and we can stop laughing, maybe more people will have a chance. I feel very, very blessed that, like, another thing I'm afraid to say, but I feel very blessed that I can afford to see a therapist for marriage counseling and for individual counseling. I don't know what I would do if I couldn't afford it. And I know that there are a lot of people, I know a lot of people in recovery that want to see a therapist and can't afford it. And I'll say, let me help you find somebody that's on a sliding fee scale and blah, 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 whatever. Well, what's the lowest they'll go? $30. I can't afford $30 every other week. I get that. That's why we need to have, you know, there's, you know, a lot of like mental health agencies and community mental health centers and things like that that offer affordable mental health treatment. But even those have waiting lists to get into and things like that. It's not a great system. It's not a good system in our country whatsoever, you know, and I feel very blessed that I can afford, you know, to get the mental health treatment that I need. And I'm extremely grateful for that, you know. Every day I'm extremely grateful for that. Maybe if we help people understand it a little bit more, maybe I'm an idealist. I know I'm an idealist, but maybe if we help people understand it more and we laugh a little bit less, maybe those things will change, you know? Maybe. But it doesn't cost a lot to not laugh at somebody about something that they can't control. I think that that's priceless. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.